the question of the pupil. You have suggested, because of this break in the chain of energetic production in us, we have fallen energetically to such a low level that we are trapped in structures. We have fallen into structures from which we cannot escape. And that Gurdjieff was teaching about these structures. This does not sound in any way like the traditional teaching ascribed to Gurdjieff. Could you explain something about these structures? What are they? The teacher replies. There are two fairly simple elementary structures that we fall into. As you have implied, as you have said in your question, there is a break in the chain of energetic production in us. So we fall to a very low energetic level. We fall into structures, psychological structures. Man is a machine, remember. Gurdjieff is recorded to have said, although there are 1,001 arguments to show that this is not true, we can understand what he's saying. He's studying man as if man is a machine. And of course the machine is a complex device made by man in order to perform a specific function or functions, and it always has an operator. So in studying the machine, we are not studying the operator. We are not studying psychology. We are studying the structure of the machine and the energies of the machine. As if we are studying a motor car. If you're studying motor mechanics, you're not concerned with the psychology of the chauffeur. Now, therefore, what Gurdjieff was teaching is the mechanics. And it's very simple. There are two structures that we can discover in ourselves and in Gurdjieff's writings that are very simple and explain, in fact, what Gurdjieff is teaching. Now, the first of these is Gurdjieff writes that we have two consciousnesses having nothing in common. He says early on in the book, almost nothing in common, but in the chapter on hypnotism, where this is explained more fully, of course, he says absolutely nothing in common. We have two conscious minds. This is a structure of a human being. Now, it sounds familiar to us because we have these ideas from Freud and Jung, and these are the geniuses, or genies are they called. We have ideas from them that there are two consciousnesses in man. We have a conscious mind and an unconscious mind, or a conscious mind and a subconscious mind. But we must be careful with this. So this is the first structure. It's a structure. We have two minds. And in fact, we have fallen to such a low level, we are living in the wrong one. So this is a statement about the structure of the ordinary man. And requires very careful analysis to understand exactly what Gurdjieff is saying and the significance of it. Now, in the Gurdjieff tradition, the traditional teaching ascribed to Gurdjieff, there is not a single mention that man has two consciousnesses. So this is very strange. This is why I suggest always that there are two completely different teachings associated with Gurdjieff. Now, the other structure, of course, that Gurdjieff points out in his writings is that we have three centres, or three brains. We are three-centred beings. And again, when we look at the Gurdjieff tradition, Ouspensky writes in the book In the Search of the Miraculous this sentence. He says, there are not three centres in man, in the ordinary man. There are not three centres in the ordinary man. It's written down in Search of the Miraculous. Well, everywhere that Gurdjieff writes about man, he writes about man as a three-centred being. And this is a structure. We have three centres. And when we look at what Ouspensky has written and what Ouspensky was teaching about the centres. But he was teaching about the centres in terms of their functions, the psychology. And this is not what Gurdjieff was teaching. Gurdjieff was teaching this is the structure of the ordinary man. This is the structure of man, a three-centered or three-brain being. So, if you are asking me about the structures and energies, which of course you are, these are two elementary structures that we have fallen into because of our lack of energy, because of our depleted energetic state as ordinary men and women. One of them, we have two conscious minds having nothing in common. We are living in the wrong one. And the second is that we are three-centered beings. We have three centers, or three brains. And this is a structural situation. It has psychological consequences, but the psychology is a consequence of the structure. Gurdjieff is not, as I say, he's not teaching about the chauffeur. He's teaching about the motor car. How is the motor car made? What energies, what's its structure? How does it work? What energies are needed? What lubricants are needed? He's not talking about the psychology of the chauffeur. So we have a Gurdjieff tradition, and this is what I'm saying, and this is probably the origin of your question. We have a Gurdjieff tradition which is teaching psychology. It's teaching about the chauffeur, the driver of the motor car, the operator of the machine. And this is evident when we look at Ouspensky's teaching. For example, I think it's on something like page 10 or 12 of The Fourth Way, the book The Fourth Way. Although this is not written by Ouspensky, it is a record by Ouspensky's pupils of Ouspensky's teaching, which shows us what Ouspensky was teaching, what Ouspensky believed, how Ouspensky interpreted and understood what Gurdjieff told him. And Ouspensky writes these two sentences together. Man is a machine. And in order to control the machine, we must do this, that and the other. Can't remember what he says, it doesn't matter. But these are two completely different teachings. Man is a machine. Gurdjieff was studying the structure, the energies of the machine, how it works, the motor car, mechanics. And in order to control the machine, this is about the driver of the motor car, the operator of the machine. This is about psychology. Completely different subject. So, thanks for your question, but I think there are two elementary structures. We have two conscious minds having nothing in common. We are living in the wrong one. And we are three-centered beings, or three-brain beings. Three centers. And what is the significance of this? Well, I've spoken elsewhere about the significance of this in terms of the fact that we can't remember ourselves. This is what Gurdjieff was pointing out. The fact that we have three centers means we can't remember ourselves. The fact that we have two conscious minds having nothing in common and we are living in the wrong one, we don't have consciousness of self. We don't have a true consciousness, state of consciousness. Consciousness of self. Of course, these are different things, but they are the statements are the consequences of these structures. And Gurdjieff was teaching about these structures. So if Gurdjieff appears to be talking about psychology, it's because he is pointing out the consequences of the structural situation. In one case, we can't remember ourselves. In another case, we don't have consciousness of self, a true state of consciousness. We are not conscious of ourselves. And these are taken in the Gurdjieff tradition as psychological truths, as if Gurdjieff was teaching psychology. But they're not. They're consequences of a structural situation, and Gurdjieff was teaching these structures. So I think that answers your question. Right. Well, it's not particularly complicated because we have these two structures. This is the core of what Gurdjieff was teaching. But the Gurdjieff tradition is completely different because it's dealing with psychology. So it's dealing with what it regards as a much bigger picture, a more important factors. It's about spirituality. It's esoteric Christianity. It's about the Sufi. It's about the glue sticks, or whatever. What are they called? Gnostics. Sorry. But Gurdjieff was teaching, let's look at man, the structures in man. Man is a machine. And these are the two structures that we can easily identify and deal with. We have two conscious minds having nothing in common. We are living in on one. And we are three-centered beings. So there is this flow of the energy of attention constantly, and we can observe this as we develop in consciousness of self, something completely different. But as we develop in consciousness of self, we can observe this flow of attention in us between the three centers, which means we can't remember ourselves. So there are these two psychological consequences, completely different psychological consequences. One, we can't remember ourselves. The second, we are not conscious of self, generally speaking. We live in a state of waking sleep because we're living in the wrong conscious mind. So this is the fundamental basis of Gurdjieff's teaching. And once you see this, everything else, everything that he was telling to Ouspensky as the first step on the stairway, or the beginning of the first step on the stairway, this elementary teaching falls into place. And then we can move on to complete the first step on the stairway and move on to the second step on the stairway. Completely different. Because the second step on the stairway deals with perception. Why is there a break in the chain of energetic production in us? Gurdjieff writes, we have an excellently working automatism for perceiving all kinds of new impressions. New impressions, the food of impressions. An automatism for perceiving. So we perceive automatically, and therefore don't digest these higher hydrogens, these higher energies, and we don't have them, so we fall to a very low level. But the answer to this is, it deals with perception. It's got to deal with perception. We perceive automatically, so we've got to deal with this automatic perception. So there's three ways we can do it. This is the second step on the stairway. This is what I teach. We can disrupt this excellently working automatism. We can bypass this excellently working automatism, or eventually we can learn by understanding it to overcome this excellently working automatism. Therefore we receive the food of impressions coming from perception as we should. And we have these higher energies, and we can start to re-establish the third step on the stairway. We can start to re-establish the various chains of energetic production in us, which come from these higher hydrogens, the receipt of these higher energies, the food of impressions coming from perception. We can start to re-establish in a process of reciprocal maintenance. In a very complex way, we can start to re-establish the energetic background to a normal life, as opposed to the ordinary life, which is abnormal. We can start to re-establish this energetic background to a normal life, depicted brilliantly by Ouspensky as the second food diagram. This is the energetic background we should have to a normal life. And we can start to re-establish and rebuild and reconstruct this energetic background to a normal life, once we deal with the fact that we have this excellently working automatism for perceiving all kinds of new impressions. So the transformation is quite a big thing, but it's not that difficult to understand, in my opinion. It's just that the Gurdjieff tradition is not dealing with this at all. The Gurdjieff tradition is talking about something else. They're off with the Gnostics or whatever. Or the Sufi. It's just madness. So we have what Gurdjieff wrote, fortunately. And from this, in conjunction with what Ouspensky wrote, and in conjunction with what Ouspensky taught, we can discern the nature of this transformation that Gurdjieff was teaching. We can discern the steps on the stairway. The second step on the stairway deals with perception. That's what I'm teaching. The question of the pupil. You have said that for Gurdjieff, he is teaching these structures in man. Structures in man, as if man is a machine. And we are studying the machine as if we are mechanics. And one of the structures in this machine is the fact that we are three-centered beings, or three-brain beings. Everywhere you have said Gurdjieff writes that man is a three-centered being, or three-brain being. And at the same time you are saying that as a consequence of this, we, as ordinary human beings in our abnormal state, cannot therefore remember ourselves. So the teaching on self-remembering is a psychological teaching as a consequence of the fact that we have three centres, or three brains. But what is the connection between the fact that we have three centres or three brains and the fact that we can't remember ourselves? This is what we find difficult to understand. The teacher replies, let's look at this in terms of the old-fashioned cinema, where there is a projector with light and it projects an image onto a screen, which is the film, the cinema. It's a simple picture. The projector, of course, is a machine. But the image on the screen is not a machine, and is a consequence of the activities, shall we say, of the projector. A machine is a complex device made by man in order to perform a specific function or functions. In this case, the projector is projecting onto a screen the film. And the projector has an operator. The machine always has an operator. But if we are studying man as a machine, we are not studying the operator of the machine. This is Ouspensky's mistake, I have said. Now, if we continue with this rather tortured analogy, then what I'm saying to you is that the psychology, Ouspensky took Gurdjieff to be teaching psychology. And the Gurdjieff tradition, coming from Ouspensky, takes Gurdjieff's teaching as if it is psychology, but it's not. Gurdjieff is teaching, let's look at man as if he is a machine, as if he is the projector. And of course, if the system in the cinema breaks down, if it doesn't work and you call in an engineer, the engineer cannot change the film, the image, by using the image. You can't change, you can't put right the fact that the projector is not working correctly using the images on the screen. You can't change a psychological situation using psychology. Now, your question is, how is it that man being a three-centered being, or three-brain being, means that the ordinary man can't remember himself? We have fallen into a situation because of a lack of energy. There is a break in the chain of energetic production in us, so we fall into a very low energetic level, and therefore we fall into structures. The fact that we have two brains, two consciousnesses. Gurdjieff says we have two consciousnesses, that is, two conscious minds having nothing in common. So we're divided into these two consciousnesses, and we are living in the wrong one. It's a structure. We have two conscious minds. But Gurdjieff also points out that we are three-centred beings, even though Ouspensky says there are not three centres in man. We have to go back to Gurdjieff. What does he write? Always three-centred beings. Now, why does this mean? This is like the projector in the cinema. We have three centres. This is a structure. This is a machine. Why then can't we remember ourselves? This is like the film, the image. We can't change the situation that we can't remember ourselves by trying to remember ourselves any more than we can change what's happening on a screen in a cinema by changing the screen, changing the image on the screen. We've got to go back to the projector, three-centred being. And Gurdjieff is saying that there is a flow of the energy of attention going on in us between the three centres. And this flow of the energy of attention can be clearly defined, as Gurdjieff does. But what it means is that at any one moment we're in one of the three centres. And it may only be a few seconds later, and because of this flow of attention, we're in a different centre. And the centres do not remember what happened in the other centres. So the centres are separate in this sense and are working according to different functions. Gurdjieff showed the existence of the centres by defining for Ouspensky the functions of them. That is, we have an intellectual centre, we have intellectual activities. This is the film on the screen. It's a psychological situation. We have emotional functions in us. Again, part of the film, part of our experience. Pleasant and unpleasant experiences. Emotional experiences. We also have experiences that are clearly physical from the body. Sensations, movements. Activities which are centred around the body. So we have a physical centre. So Gurdjieff was pointing out the fact that we have three centres, three sources of intelligence, if you like, three sources of psychology. As a consequence, and this is like the image of the film, as a consequence of the work of the projector, of the structure of the projector in the cinema, the fact that we have three centres. Now, the point is, for Gurdjieff, that there is this flow, constant flow between the three centres. We're always in only one of those three centres. This is an abnormal situation that we've fallen into. We should be individuals and have a fourth something in us that is us, independent of the three centres. But we don't, because we don't have the energies. So this is Gurdjieff's teaching. There's a structure there we've fallen into, the three centres, a constant flow, constant change between the three centres. And the centres can't remember what's happened in the other centres, the other two centres. So any centre that we're in, it can't remember what happened a few seconds ago because we were in a different centre. And the centres can't remember. They're not connected in a way that allows them to remember what happened previously in another centre. So Gurdjieff is saying there should be a fourth entity, but there isn't. So it's an abnormal situation that he's pointing out. We can't remember ourselves as ordinary men and women because we've fallen into a structural situation in which we have three centres. That's how we're structured. And there is this flow of the energy of attention constantly going on between the centres. And at any one time, only one of those centres is actually in contact with the world, or at least has the possibility of being in contact with the world. And this is an abnormal situation. And psychologically, as a consequence of this situation, we can't remember ourselves. Because the intellectual centre can't remember what happened a few seconds ago in the emotional centre. And the emotional centre can't remember what happened a few seconds ago in the physical centre. And the physical centre certainly can't remember what happened a few seconds ago in the intellectual centre, and so on. So we can't remember ourselves because we've fallen into this situation. And Gurdjieff is saying and suggests to Ouspensky this emphasis on four, emphasis on a master, the emphasis on individuality. From Gurdjieff, which appears in the book In Search of the Miraculous. This is what Gurdjieff was teaching Ouspensky, the beginnings of the first step on the stairway. The emphasis on this is this idea that there should be a fourth entity. There should be us, independent of the three centres, able therefore to remember ourselves. But this fourth entity is not there, and it's not there for psychological reasons. It's there, it's the part of the structure. We've fallen into a structure of three centres, which exists and should exist. But we've fallen into that structure, leaving behind the fourth entity, because we don't have the energies for this fourth entity, us, to manifest. So we can't remember ourselves because we are living in three centres instead of actually being ourselves. We don't have the energy to be ourselves, to manifest as ourselves, as a fourth entity, independent of the three centres. So this is why, this is a connection between the structure that we've fallen into, the three centres, and the fact that we can't remember ourselves. If Gurdjieff says, Gurdjieff never wrote this, he doesn't write this, but he did say to Ouspensky, we can't remember ourselves. Ouspensky attaches great importance to this. But Ouspensky attaches importance to it as a psychological truth. Ouspensky is saying, look at the screen. We can't remember ourselves. Let's try and change that situation. Let's try and do something to the screen to change that situation. Whereas Gurdjieff is saying, it's a structural situation. It's to do with the projector that's not working properly. It's nothing to do with psychology. It's to do with the structure and energies in man. So that's the connection between the idea of a machine. Let's look at man as if he is a machine. So we're talking about structures and energies, and the connection between this and our psychology. Ouspensky is essentially saying we can change our psychology by psychological means. Gurdjieff is saying we can't, because it's a structural and energetic situation. So we've got to change it. We've got to change things. We've got to understand the structure, and we've got to change the energies. We can't do this by psychological means. The only way we can do it is by techniques that we can learn. So we need a teacher to tell us the techniques. Why else would you have a teacher? The teacher is not telling you about your psychology. This would be absurd. This would be like being some sort of psychologist or psychiatrist or something idiotic like that. You can't change your psychology by psychological means, because the psychology is a consequence of a structural situation. We don't have enough energy. We don't have the energies we should. There is a break in the chain of energetic production in us. So the fact that we have three centres and this constant flow of attention between them, and the fact that we have fallen into this situation of being stuck in these three centres instead of having a fourth entity, ourself, independent of these three centres. We don't have this, therefore we can't remember ourselves. And not remembering ourselves is the psychological consequence of the structural situation, and can't be remedied by psychological means. So I think that probably answers your question.